I still remember the smell of roasted turkey drifting through the doorway when my daughter-in-law blocked my way. Her arms folded across her sweater, her eyes cold as stone. She told me I would not be welcome at Thanksgiving dinner unless I apologized. The words hung in the air like a slap. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 78 years old, a retired high school teacher who once believed that family meant loyalty, sacrifice, and a place at the table no matter what. Yet there I stood, clutching a warm apple tart I had baked with trembling hands, told that I was not wanted in my own son's home. For a moment I thought maybe Robert, my only son, would step forward. He was inside arranging chairs, adjusting silverware as though that was the most urgent task in the world. I waited for him to look at me, to say something, anything that proved I still mattered. But he kept his head bowed, silent. A shadow of the boy I once stayed up with on nights when fever shook his body. His silence stung worse than Juliet's sharp voice. I asked quietly, "Robert, are you really going to let this happen?" He did not even raise his eyes. The laughter from inside the house swelled, clinking glasses, children, shouting the warm chorus of family life I had built my whole world around, but I was left standing in the cold November wind, unwelcome, holding my tart like an unwanted burden. I placed it gently on the porch table beside me, along with a small mahogany box that had carried my family's recipes for generations. If memories meant nothing to them, then I would not force them inside. I turned, wrapped my scarf tighter, and walked back to my car. Their voices followed me only as muffled echoes, and each step down the path felt heavier than the last. That was the moment I knew something inside me had broken, and something else had awakened. I would not beg for a place at their table. If they believed I was powerless, they were about to discover just how wrong they were. The car door felt heavier than usual as I pulled it open and lowered myself into the driver's seat. My hands shook so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the tart I had left behind, the wooden box of recipes resting on the porch like forgotten relics. My breath clouded the windshield as the November wind rattled through the trees. I whispered to myself, "So this is what family means now." The words felt foreign, bitter, a taste I could not swallow. Driving home through the dark streets, my mind betrayed me with memories I had tried to bury. It was not the first time Robert had looked at me with silent desperation. Years ago, back in 2011, the economy had collapsed, and so had his pride. I still remember the night he sat at my kitchen table, his hands trembling, his face pale. "Mom, I'm losing everything," he had whispered. "If the bank takes the house, Juliet will never forgive me." I had worked nearly 40 years as a teacher, stretching paychecks, grading papers until my fingers ached. My retirement fund was supposed to be my safety. But when I saw him crumbling, I thought only of saving my son. The bank suggested joint accounts, a way to make things easier if something happened to me. I signed my name beside his, believing I was giving him a lifeline, not handing him a weapon. He squeezed my hand that day, tears in his eyes. "You saved us, Mom." Gratitude faded, entitlement grew. Over the years, Juliet's voice grew sharper, Robert's silence heavier. Tonight, that silence had sealed my exile. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I could feel the weight of what I had done years ago pressing down on me. I had given them access not just to my savings, but to my trust. And now, standing alone in my quiet kitchen, I understood something that chilled me more than the November air outside. Trust once broken is no longer shelter, it becomes a blade. And that blade was already pressing against my throat. The house greeted me with silence when I stepped inside. The kind of silence that seeps into your bones. I hung my scarf on the chair and set a small pot of soup on the stove, something I had prepared that morning, just in case. That phrase struck me now, sharp and ironic, just in case my family turned me away. I ladled the soup into a bowl, the steam rising faintly, and carried it to the kitchen table. Across town, I imagined the glow of chandeliers over Robert's table, laughter spilling across plates heavy with turkey and cranberry sauce. The contrast cut like glass. Here I sat alone, spooning butternut squash soup in a room that felt colder than ever. The answering machine blinked with messages. I pressed play and the voices filled the room. Mr. Henderson from next door wished me a happy Thanksgiving. Another neighbor invited me to visit if I was lonely. Then came the polite monotone of the pharmacy reminding me about a prescription. Their words skimmed across me like pebbles on water. Polite, even kind, but none of them could fill the hollow where my son's voice should have been. My spoon clattered against the bowl. I covered my face with both hands, letting the steam sting my cheeks. For a long moment, I sat there, wondering how love could sour so completely. Then, almost without thinking, I rose and walked to the desk where I kept my old documents. My hands dug through envelopes until they found the folder marked Accounts. The paper spread across the table in a fan of ink and signatures. My name, Robert's name. Every line tied us together in ways that now felt suffocating. I remembered the banker's voice years ago. Either party may withdraw funds at any time. Back then, it had been a formality. Tonight, it was a warning I had ignored. I pressed my palms flat against the papers. Betrayal had stripped me raw. But in the hollow ache, there was something harder forming resolve. If they saw me as nothing more than a name on paper, then maybe it was time I showed them how wrong they were. While I sat alone in my kitchen that night, someone else in that bright house across town had been watching. Isabel, my 20-year-old granddaughter, had stood frozen in the hallway when Juliet shut me out. From her angle, she saw the tart in my hands, the wooden box tucked beneath my arm, and the way my shoulders trembled as I walked away. She wanted to call after me, but fear glued her tongue to the roof of her mouth. Dinner went on as if nothing had happened. Plates clattered, wine was poured, and football played loudly on the television. Isabel sat at the far end of the table, her fork unmoving. She watched her father lean close to Juliet, whispering about a property near Lake Huron they hoped to buy. Her mother's phone screen glowed with an email, opened the subject line bold and unmistakable. Trust transfer schedule. Isabel's stomach turned. She had heard whispers before, phrases like our money or when the trust clears, but seeing it written out made her blood run cold. She stabbed at her food to keep her hands from shaking. Inside her head, one thought beat like a drum. They treat Grandma's savings as if it already belongs to them. Later, while the others carried dishes to the sink, Isabel slipped into the study, her pulse hammered as she clicked through her mother's inbox. Emails from brokers, lawyers, realtors, all speaking in the same confident tone, congratulating them on funds that were not theirs. One line in particular burned into her mind. Once the accounts are reallocated, you'll be positioned for the Lake Huron purchase. She covered her mouth, fighting the urge to scream. They weren't just planning for the future. They were circling her grandmother's life like vultures, ready to strike. A floorboard creaked. Isabel shut the laptop in panic, pressing her back against the desk as Juliet's footsteps passed by. When the hallway fell silent again, she gathered the courage to print several emails and hide them inside her jacket. That night, lying awake in her room, Isabel made her decision. She could not stay quiet anymore. Tomorrow she would go to me. The morning after Thanksgiving, the air was sharp with frost, the kind that coated the windows and bit at your fingers, even through gloves. I was still in my robe, nursing a cup of black coffee, when a hesitant knock echoed on my front door. I pulled the curtain back and saw Isabel standing there, her coat too thin for the chill, her face pale and frightened. She clutched a folder against her chest as if it were armor. "Grandma," she whispered when I opened the door. I had to come. I can't keep this to myself. I guided her inside, set a kettle on the stove, and waited. Her hands trembled as she slid the folder across the table. Inside were printed emails fresh from the night before. My heart hammered as I read Juliet's messages to Robert. We need to move fast before she notices. Once the transfer is complete, we'll have enough for the Lake Huron house. Another email from a broker congratulated them on securing funds that were still legally mine. The blood rushed to my face, but not from weakness. It was fury, raw and cleansing. I looked up to see Isabel's eyes brimming with tears. "I couldn't just stand by," she whispered. "They talk about your money like it's already theirs, like you don't even matter." I reached across the table, covering her shaking hands with mine. For years, I had suspected, but seeing it in black and white stripped away the last of my illusions. They weren't careless. They were predators. "Then it's time," I said quietly. Isabel blinked. "Time for what?" "For me to act before they do." My voice was steady now, stronger than I had heard it in years. Her lips parted, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You're really going to stop them?" "Yes," I told her. Not just for the money, for the respect they stole from me. She sat back, breathing hard but nodded. That morning, in my small kitchen, the two of us formed a silent pact. I was no longer alone, and they had no idea what was coming. That night, long after Isabel had gone home, I sat at my dining table with papers spread out like a battlefield map. The lamp cast a circle of light over account statements, trust documents, and insurance forms that had collected dust for years. I traced my finger over the signatures, my name bound to Robert's in ink that now felt more like shackles. I remembered the banker's polite warning when I first signed. Both parties have equal rights. Either one may withdraw at any time. At the time, I had brushed it off as a formality. Tonight, those words felt like a prophecy I had foolishly ignored. Isabel came back the next day carrying her backpack instead of a folder and sat across from me with a determined expression. She didn't scroll her phone or hide behind small talk. She just watched me sort the papers. "Grandma," she asked softly, "do you really have to go through all of this? It looks so complicated." "Complicated is better than helpless," I told her. "Paperwork may look boring, but it can decide who controls a life, and mine is still mine to control." Her eyes glistened with something between fear and admiration. I clipped the documents into neat stacks, each one representing a piece of ground I had to reclaim. "The joint accounts," I murmured almost to myself, "those need to be separated. The trust. I can change trustees if it's being abused. Insurance policies must list people I actually trust." Isabel leaned forward. "So, you can undo it. You can really take it back." "Yes," I said firmly, "but only if I act before they do." For the first time in years, I felt the scales tipping in my favor. Isabel smiled faintly. "I'm glad you're doing this. They don't deserve it, and I'm learning from you." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "Then promise me something. Never let anyone sign your life away for you. Not even if they call it love." She nodded, and for a moment the room felt lighter. The chains I had carried for so long were beginning to loosen. Black Friday morning arrived with a cold so sharp it stung my cheeks as I walked from the parking lot into the glass doors of First Coastal Bank. Shoppers rushed past me with bags and chatter about sales, but my purpose had nothing to do with bargains. My leather folder, heavy in my arms, carried every piece of my future. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you today?" "I need to see a senior banker," I said firmly. "This morning, if possible." Minutes later, I was seated in a small office with glass walls facing a man in a navy suit whose nameplate read Mr. Owen. He offered a professional smile, but I leaned forward before he could begin his script. "Mr. Owen, I'm here to close every joint account that bears my name alongside Robert Vance. I want all funds transferred into a new trust account, effective immediately. The sole beneficiary will be Isabel Vance, my granddaughter." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he did not flinch. "All right, Mrs. Vance. May I see your documents?" I spread the folder across the desk like evidence in a trial. Bank statements, IDs, notarized papers, all laid out in perfect order. For once, my hands didn't shake. "You understand," he said carefully, "that joint accounts allow either party to withdraw without the other's permission. To separate them, we'll need to close them entirely. Since you're here first, we can process your portion without delay." "That's exactly why I came now," I answered. He typed briskly, drafting forms and explaining each clause. I signed every line with deliberate care, reclaiming authority I had surrendered years ago. When the final page was complete, he looked up with a nod. "Your accounts are officially closed. Funds will be transferred to the new trust by end of day. Isabel Vance is listed as sole beneficiary." For a moment, I closed my eyes. Relief washed over me like warm sunlight. This wasn't just paperwork, it was freedom. Isabel, seated quietly beside me, squeezed my hand. "Grandma, you really did it." I smiled faintly. "Yes, sweetheart. And I'll never let them take it again." While I sat in that quiet office reclaiming my future, Robert and Juliet were living in a very different world. At the outlet mall just outside town, they strolled through polished storefronts like a pair of celebrities, their arms draped with shopping bags from Gucci and Prada. Juliet held her phone high, filming a video for social media. "Say hi, babe." she chirped, turning the camera toward Robert as he modeled a new watch. He grinned, adjusting his sunglasses, and lifted his wrist proudly. "This is how Black Friday should be done," he boasted. They moved from boutique to boutique, swiping cards without a thought. At Rolex, Robert selected a model worth more than a year of groceries for me. Juliet clapped her hands like a child opening presents. "Perfect. You deserve it." But the illusion cracked when the cashier slid his card and the machine beeped. "Declined." "Run it again," Robert said, his voice sharp. The cashier obliged. "Declined." Juliet's cheeks flushed crimson. "That's impossible. We just used it this morning." She shoved her own card across the counter. "Declined." The murmur of customers behind them grew louder, whispers spreading like wildfire. Juliet snatched her phone, tapping furiously. "Call her," she hissed. "Call your mother right now." Robert dialed, pacing in front of the store as the call rang and rang. My phone buzzed in my purse where I sat in the back of a cab, the ink still drying on my new trust papers. One missed call, then 3, then 10. By the time the cab turned down my street, there were 25. I flipped the phone face down on my lap and let it vibrate itself silent. Inside the mall, Juliet's fury boiled over. "She did something." She spat. "I know she did. She's too soft," you said. "Too old. And now look at us." Robert's jaw clenched, his voice low and bitter. "She warned us. We just didn't believe her." The pounding on my front door came just after sunset, loud enough to rattle the glass panes. I had been expecting it, but my heart still gave one heavy thud as I set down my teacup and walked calmly to the entryway. Through the peephole I saw them, Robert and Juliet, faces flushed, eyes blazing. "Open this door, Mom!" Robert barked. I slid the chain free and stepped aside as they stormed in. Juliet's heels stabbed against the floorboards as she threw her purse on the table. "You've destroyed everything," she spat. "You had no right." Robert's voice trembled with rage. "What did you do? You closed the accounts, didn't you?" I shut the door behind them, turned the lock, and faced them squarely. My voice was calm, steady. "Yes, and let me remind you, when I signed your names onto those accounts years ago, that was not a right, that was trust. Trust you buried with your own hands." Juliet's mouth twisted. "Don't give us speeches. You can't just erase us from what's ours." I moved to the sideboard and pulled out the folder I had prepared. Laying the papers on the dining table, I spread them neatly for them to see. Here are the finalized trust documents. Joint accounts closed, funds transferred. Beneficiary Isabel Vance, sole and irrevocable. Robert's eyes widened, his hand slamming against the table. "Isabel? You cut your own son out and gave it all to a child." "She is not just a child," I answered firmly. "She is the only one who told me the truth, the only one who stood by me without asking for a dime." For a moment, the room held its breath. Juliet leaned forward, her nails tapping the table like claws. "So what? This is punishment. You think you can humiliate us?" I met her glare without flinching. "No, this isn't punishment. This is protection. Something you never offered me." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one shrinking back. I was the one holding the ground. Robert sank into a chair, his shoulders slumped, his hands running through his hair. His voice cracked low and uneven. "You don't understand, Mom. 2011 destroyed me. I lost everything I built. The business, the respect, the pride. I was a failure. And every time I saw you steady, untouched, it burned. You had what I didn't, and I hated it." Juliet seized on his words, her tone shrill. "Exactly. You sat on your savings while we struggled. You patched our wounds with scraps while you kept your nest egg safe. Don't you dare judge us now for wanting what should have been ours all along." I folded my hands, my face calm, though my heart thudded. I understand shame. I understand loss. I was the one patching shoes. Making dinners from nothing. But suffering does not give you a license to wound others. Pain explains behavior. It does not excuse betrayal. Juliet's eyes flared, her voice shaking. We suffered, and you watched. You could have made it easier. I stood then, letting my words cut clean through the room. I couldn't hand you resilience like a check. That's not how life works. You chose greed instead of rebuilding. You chose lies instead of honesty. That is not on me. From the doorway came a voice neither of them expected. She's right. Isabel stepped into the room, her chin high, her eyes steady. She laid the printed emails on the table with a decisive slap. I saw everything. You planned to sell her out of her own home. You wanted to erase her while she was still alive. That isn't family. It's theft. Juliet spun on her, her mouth twisted in fury. Ungrateful child. No. Isabel cut in, her voice sharp and unwavering. Grandma gave me love without a price tag. That's who I choose. For once, Robert couldn't meet his daughter's eyes. His silence spoke louder than Juliet's rage. The weight of their choices finally lay squarely on their shoulders, not mine. The moving truck pulled away just as the winter sun dipped low over Lake Superior. My new house was small, painted a soft gray that blended with the shoreline mist, but its porch faced the open water, and the air smelled of pine and salt. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Isabel carried in the lighter boxes, her sleeves rolled up, her hair tied back, moving with a kind of determination that reminded me of the young teacher I once was. Together, we unpacked quietly, her arranging plates in the kitchen while I stacked books by the window. There was no shouting, no tension. Only the rhythm of two people who had chosen each other freely. Later that evening, we sat on the porch with paper-wrapped fish and chips from a local diner. The gulls wheeled overhead, the horizon burned pink, and Isabel laughed when I fumbled with the flimsy fork. For the price they charge, you'd think they'd give us real silverware, she teased. Her laugh was light, infectious, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I joined in without reservation. When my phone buzzed on the railing, Robert's name flashing across the screen, I turned it face down. Juliet had tried too, I knew, but the silence was sweeter. Protecting myself was not cruelty, it was clarity. That night, after Isabel went to bed, I sat at my small desk and wrote her a letter. My dear Isabel, life will offer you tables dressed in fine linens, but never sit at a table that exists only to measure how much you can endure. Rise, walk away, and set your own table. Invite those who honor you, not those who consume you. I folded the letter, sealing it with her name. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight. I stepped onto the porch with my tea wrapped in a blanket, listening to the water's endless rhythm. For once, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. My dignity was intact, my peace reclaimed, and at last, I understood I had not lost my family. I had simply chosen who deserved to be part of it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe to Minister of Revenge and join me for more every day.